the equation is not in vertex form and you can't compare the a's and k value, what you're going to need to do is go ahead and use the discriminant. So the discriminant is the part inside the quadratic roots formula. Okay, so if you're going to use the quadratic formula to do that, then you need to make sure that you understand which part to take. So here's the quadratic formula. Oh, something just went weird up here. Okay, so there's the quadratic formula, and you're only going to use what we call the discriminant, and that's the part inside the square root. Okay, so you know that you have two zeros if your b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. So if you calculate those values, just the inside, you don't have to do the whole quadratic formula. If you know that that value is greater than 0, then there are two zeros. If there's 1 0, then you'll recognize that b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. Okay? And then there are no zeros if that part is a negative. So if it's less than 0, because you can't do the square root of a negative. So that's the way that I usually remember it. I know that that part that's highlighted cannot be less than 0, otherwise you can't calculate it. So I do that one first, and then I kind of go from there. So this is something that you kind of have to memorize in order to do these types of examples. So you're going to be given a couple different forms. We've got 2 examples with vertex form and 2 examples with standard form. And they tell you to determine the number of roots. Now the key word is number of. They're not asking for the roots. They want the number of roots. So let's start by looking at the first function. We know that if it's in vertex form, if it's in vertex form, if I go back up, you're talking about a and k only. You don't have to worry about the h. So let's figure out what the a value is. A is -2, k is equal to -4. Okay, so we know that the parabola opens down, and we know that it's below the y-axis. Okay, so if it's open down and is below the y-axis, there are no real roots. But that's not the only way to do it. Since they both have the same sign, a and k have the same sign, so see how they're both negative? That means I'll write that down here. A and k have the same sign. They're both negative, which means, therefore, there are no roots in this case. Okay, so moving on. Question B, still vertex form, so we still want to list A, which is -3, and our k value, which is 1. So in this case, the parabola opens down, but it's going above the y-axis. So it will cross, and it's actually going to cross twice. So in this case, we know that a and k have different signs. Okay, you don't need to write this down. You would just need to write, therefore, there are 2 real, because they're still real numbers, and they're different. So we're going to write 2 real distinct roots. That's how you write that, without doing the actual work. Okay? We're not asking you to do the quadratic formula. We're not asking you to complete the square. We're just asking you to find how many roots. C and D are both in standard form. So when it's in standard form, we actually have to calculate b squared minus 4ac. So we want to see what's happening with that. So my b value is -6. My a value is 1. My c value is 3. Don't make the mistake of saying that -6 times -6 is -36. It's not. It's positive 36. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And there's only one negative. So 36 minus 12, 36 minus 12 is equal to 24. Okay, and since 24 is greater than 0, okay, we'll just write that down on the side. Since 24 is greater than 0, if you go back up to the note, since it's greater than 0, then that means there are 2 zeros. So therefore, there are 2 zeros. All right, moving on to the next one. Again, standard form, so we need to calculate b squared minus 4ac. b is negative 20 times 4 times 25. Negative 20 times negative 20 is 400. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 25 is 400 again. So notice here how 400 minus 400 is 0. So because it's equal to 0, that means that therefore there is 1 root. So you'll notice that I write it kind of differently. If you're going with the word roots, you have to use the words real and distinct. If you're going with the words roots, you should, when you're using the word zeros, you can just say that there are 2, 1, or 0. Okay, example 4. For what values of k does the equation kx minus 8 equals 2x squared? So in what values of k can you have if there's 2 real roots, if there's 1 real root, or if there are no real roots? So this we need to put in standard form. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now I want to keep the x squared positive, so I'm going to keep the 2x squared on that side. So I'm going to subtract kx on both sides, and I'm going to add 8 on both sides. So this will give me 0 equals 2x squared minus kx plus 8. Okay. So because this is in standard form, we need to use b squared minus 4ac. And in order to have 2 distinct real roots, we know that whatever value that is, it has to be greater than 0. So you have to start by writing that down. So our b value is negative k. So I know that's a little bit weird, but whatever. Negative k squared minus 4 times your a is 2. And your c is 8. These are inequalities, so you have to make sure that you put, oh, not 8 there, put a 0. Greater than 0 instead of an equal sign. So negative k times negative k is k squared. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 8 is 64. There's only one negative, so just like that. And then you solve your inequality. And I believe you guys did this. So I'm going to add 64 on both sides, basically solving for k. To get rid of that squared, you do the square root, which means k has to be greater than 8 or negative 8. So I cannot just write plus 8 or negative 8. And the reasoning behind that is because you can't actually do the square root of negative 8. So you can't do plus or minus on the right side, but you should be doing plus or minus on the left side. So this is a little bit tricky, okay, and a little bit complicated. When I get back, we'll hopefully see some homework like this. So you can't do the square root of negative 8, so that's why you only pick the positive 8 value. Now in this case, because you're solving an inequality, you have 2 kind of expressions. K is greater than 8, or negative k is greater than 8. And you don't really want a negative k value, so what you do is you divide both by negative 1. But when you do that, you have to change the sign at the same time. So you have 2 k values that are actually going to work, but in this case, k is either greater than 8 or k is less than negative 8. So those are the 2 solutions for question A. Now for question B, you do kind of the same thing, except in this case, we have b squared minus 4ac equals 0 because it's 0 roots. So we basically end up doing the same thing, negative k squared minus 4 times 2 times 8. Not greater this time, it's actually equal to 0. So it's the same thing, k squared minus 64 equals 0. In this case, we can go k squared equals 64. Okay, and because it's equals, at this point you can do the square root, and you can say that x or k equals positive or negative 8. So there's one real root when k is equal to either plus 8 or when it happens at -8. So one real root occurs at k equals 8 or k equals -8. Okay. All right, moving on to C, same idea, except this case it's for no real roots. So which values of k will it work for no real roots, which means that your value has to be less than 0. So same idea. Negative k squared minus 4 times 2 times 8. So we've got k squared minus 64 is less. I don't know why I keep putting an 8 there. I'm sorry. It's a 0. At this point, k squared is less than positive 64. Remember, again, in this case, we can't do the square root of negative 64. So we're going to put a plus or minus in front of the k. 8. So positive k is going to be less than 8. Or we're going to have negative k, which is less than 8. But remember, when we divide by -1, we have to change the sign to greater than, just like that. So we have no real roots, therefore, no real roots when k is less than 8 or k is greater than -8. So just be careful with those inequalities. You can't do the negative square root of a number, so you do the plus or minus of the k value instead. So there's a practice worksheet that I have for you, and so you're going to complete numbers, number 1 to 5, and then number 7 to 10. Okay, and then once you're done this note, you'll be doing your quiz. And the quiz, you should only be taking 20 minutes max. So there's a 20-minute complete timeline on your quiz. So we will be taking it back after that 20 minutes. Once you're done your quiz, you can work on this homework that we'll take up tomorrow if you need some help with.